Do you believe that a lion could remember someone for 20 years? That, out of hundreds of unfamiliar faces, it could still find the one who once held it close, when it was just a tiny, injured, trembling cub caught in a forest fire. And then one day, across the wild grasslands of the Serengeti, it came back. No roaring, no hunting, just silence and footsteps, until it gently rested its head on the woman's shoulder, the very same woman from all those years ago, as if to say, I remember. This isn't a fairy tale. This actually happened. And if you've ever loved an animal with all your heart, you'll understand why this miracle was never just a coincidence. The story began in 2005, under the scorching heat of the dry season in Serengeti. Rosa was a young volunteer working at a rescue camp deep inside the wildlife reserve. One day, while inspecting an area recently hit by a wildfire, she heard a faint rustling sound coming from the bushes. She bent down, and there it was, a tiny creature, trembling with fear. A lion cub. Its paw was lightly burned, and its wide, teary eyes looked up at her, as if begging for help. Rosa didn't hesitate. She wrapped the cub in her jacket and rushed it back to camp. "I'll call you, Kanu," she whispered, as she gently wiped the charred dust from its little face. From that day on, Kanu grew up in Rosa's arms, drinking milk from a tiny bottle, curled up in an old blanket every night. He grew like an oversized kitten, playful, affectionate, and always looking for a way to nuzzle into Rosa's lap whenever the wind picked up. One time, Rosa went out to check the station, without taking Kanu with her. He waited for hours, sitting still, eyes locked on the old dirt road. And when she finally returned, Kanu ran toward her, tumbling into her arms, whimpering like a child. They were a little family. No words needed, just presence, just love. But that happiness couldn't last forever. When Kanu turned one, Rosa received the news from the organization. He had to be released into the wild. It broke her heart, but she knew deep down she couldn't keep him. On the day they said goodbye, Rosa opened the gate to the training enclosure. Kanu hesitated for a moment, then turned back to look at her, and stared for a long, long time. She knelt down and whispered, "Be strong out there, but if one day you miss your mom, you can come back." And then Kanu stepped into the grass. No one knew what would happen next. 20 years passed. Rosa was now an older woman, her hair silver with time, living peacefully with her daughter in a quiet coastal town. Every morning, she'd sit on the front porch, a warm cup of tea in hand, gazing off into the distance. Resting on her lap was an old photograph. A young woman and a lion cub lying side by side beneath the shade of a tree. That was Kanu, the creature she had never stopped thinking about, even after 20 long years. That summer, her daughter, a wildlife photographer, invited Rosa to join her and some friends on a trip to the Serengeti to film the wild ecosystem. At first, Rosa said no. But then, there was something in her daughter's eyes, something unspoken, that made her say yes. They flew together to Tanzania, riding in a familiar safari truck, gliding through golden waves of grass swaying in the wind. Their guide was a young man, passionate and knowledgeable. He told the group stories about the region's iconic wildlife, and then he paused lingering on one name. "We have a very special lion in the Southern Reserve. His name is Kanu. He's fairly old now, but different from the others. He doesn't attack people. Once, he even pressed his head against a staff member's shoulder, and no one knows why." Rosa's hand tightened around the edge of her seat. Her heart was pounding. She turned her face toward the window. The wind brushed against her cheek. And even she couldn't have imagined that just hours after hearing that name, Kanu, from the guide's lips, she would come face to face with something she had only dared to dream of. In her quietest dreams, a reunion. Long thought, buried beneath the dust of time, was slowly finding its way back. The safari truck slowly came to a halt in the middle of the grasslands. The sun had tilted westward, casting everything in a brilliant, fiery orange. In the distance, a golden figure was approaching. It was a fully grown male lion, tall, powerful, with a thick, majestic mane. Everyone held their breath. The guide raised his hand, signaling not to move. But something was strange. The lion didn't roar, didn't growl, didn't show any signs of hunting. It just kept walking, slowly, as if searching for something familiar. Rosa sat in silence, her hands clasped tightly together, eyes fixed on the creature before her. And then, driven by something deep, unexplainable, she opened the door. "Mom?" her daughter whispered, worried. "It's okay," Rosa replied softly. "I think I know him." She stepped down. The breeze gently tugged at her shirt. Blades of grass brushed her ankles like a quiet invitation. The lion stopped, just 10 steps away now. "Kanu!" she called, her voice trembling. He lifted his head. The entire group froze. And then, in a moment no one could explain, the lion let out a sound. Not a roar, but a soft, low cry, like the sob of a child. He took a few more steps, and then lowered his head, gently pressing it into Rosa's shoulder. She raised her hand and laid it on the thick, familiar mane. A soft, trembling touch, as if two souls had just found each other again, after a lifetime apart. The cameraman's hands shook. A few people wiped away tears. Rosa said nothing. She simply wrapped her arms around the lion's neck, and everything else fell silent. No wind, no birds, just one story, a story no one would have believed, unfolding before their very eyes. The story of Rosa and Kanu's reunion spread quickly across the reserve. At first, no one believed it. Maybe it was just a coincidence, a researcher said, or the lion's instinct, recognizing someone non-threatening. But then, a staff member at the conservation center quietly dug through the old records, and there it was. The name Kanu, handwritten beside a note that read, "Orphaned, cared for by female volunteer, Rosa." 20 years had passed, and yet, this creature still remembered. The woman who once held him to sleep every night, who fed him warm milk when his tiny breaths were faint and shallow. The photo of Rosa and Kanu went viral across wildlife forums. Beneath the African sunset, an elderly woman, wrapped around the neck of a full-grown male lion, like a mother holding her grown son, brought millions to tears. Zoologists began to analyze the case. Some said, lions have long-term memory tied to scent. Others claimed they remember through emotion, not faces. But Rosa, she didn't need science to explain it. We don't need to understand love, she said. We just need to believe that if we give something with all our heart, somewhere, some soul will remember. Before leaving the reserve, Rosa was allowed one final afternoon with Kanu. She sat on a large rock, her hand resting gently on his mane, and together they watched the sun go down. That afternoon, Rosa didn't say much. She simply sat beside Kanu, as if not a single year had passed between them. The wind whispered through his mane. The golden light of dusk bathed the Serengeti in warmth. And then Rosa leaned in and softly whispered in his ear, "Thank you for remembering me, even when the whole world forgot." Kanu didn't answer. He just pressed his head into her hand, gently, as if to say, "I never forgot." A week later, Rosa and her daughter left the reserve. Before she went, she left behind a letter and a photo of her and Kanu, taken together beneath the African sky. At the bottom of the letter, her trembling handwriting read, "Animals don't keep photographs, but they hold on to something no picture can ever capture, the feeling of being loved." The documentary about their miraculous reunion was shown in schools, libraries, and nature-loving communities around the world. There was no dramatic soundtrack, no flashy edits, just a simple story that reached the deepest corners of the human heart. You might forget an animal you once rescued, but you'll never truly know if it's still watching you from afar, waiting for one last chance to say, "I remember." If you've stayed with us until now, thank you for listening. If you once believed lions were nothing but predators, driven by instinct, think again. Because somewhere, deep in the wilderness, there's still a heart that never forgets love. The Woman and the Lion, a reunion after 20 years, has become a new symbol of a love that transcends species.